They used to call these lifetime fires, but now we get them every year.
We didn't have long, but we had just took off in a panic. And all these amazing fire people saved my house.
I don't know where to start anymore.
It takes a lot for a child to come up to a parent or an adult and tell them, I'm being bullied.
Our streets are screaming out for neighborliness. Hollywood is also calling out for neighborliness. And our world is crying out during some of the worst natural disasters on record. Is neighborliness on the decline in a world on edge? Today on Context, we answer those questions and visit Makkah First Nations, where our country's oldest neighbors need our help now. Heartbreaking tragedy in Makkah Sagaegan First Nation, located 3 hours north of Saskatoon. First Nation leaders there have called a state of emergency after a rash of suicide. As part of being a neighbor to those in crisis, Crossroads First Peoples Voices producer Crystal Lavallee is on the ground in Makkah. Crystal, what help is needed?
Thanks, Lorna. Well, with the work that I do with a number of charities, it's a lot of hopelessness. It's a lot of anxiety, depression. And, for some of these remote communities, they don't have access to healthcare. They don't have access to some of the things that we would have in a major city. And so, social media plays into that, where, a lot of kids are on their phones. They're seeing what their other friends do. They're not really interacting with their parents. And so it really comes down to that message. What message are we sending to First Nation youth, and who's sending that message, and how are we getting the word out there?
Crystal, the devastating news of 7 more suicide attempts since the 10-year-old girl committed suicide. 7 more youth attempts there in Makkah. What's going on?
Being on the ground here for the last couple of days, what an honor it's been that they invited us into their community, and just sitting with the different members. A lot of them, they know exactly what they're doing. Every community knows what their community needs. And so just to come in as a support, I would say it's strengthening the arms of the crisis workers, of the prevention workers. It's coming in with blessing. It's coming in with, a box of tissues, and it's coming in with candles to say, hey, you're not alone in this fight. Canada cares. Canadians care. Mm-hmm. And as your neighbors, we're here to stand with you and release blessing and release words of life over the community.
Oh, great. Crystal, stay up there as long as it takes. That was Crystal Lavallee from Makkah Sagaegan First Nation. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorna.
Well, from neighbor care with our First Nations to Toronto now, where hundreds of residents are grappling with the Gosford fire and where they're going to live next. Context producer Christine Yu was on the scene.
Bring us back to that day and tell us what was happening when the fire broke out.
At first, we thought that it's just a false alarm or something like that. So my family is only wearing flip-flops and shorts.
It's impossible to think about not having a home. How are you guys coping right now?
It's really hard, especially we're working, right? So I haven't worked actually since the fire broke out. And I don't have my uniform, I don't have my IDs. We need to grab our stuff. So fortunately, we've been able to go back to the unit.
What kind of support have you been receiving from building management?
To be honest with you, nothing. I never saw them since the fire broke out. It's really frustrating. We've been paying our rent are so high, and then we never heard anything from them. It's just an update from their Facebook page. Unfortunately, there's no timeline. They're trying to say that they need to finish the structures, everything. They have to fix everything before we can move. So it's really hard for us. We don't know when are we going to go back.
You've been staying at a community center down the street for the last few days. Is there a sense of community? How are your neighbors coping?
Our neighbors are okay too. Like we're gathering sometimes, have some meeting, like what can we do after that? What do we need to do, And Red Cross is helping us a lot, so it's very good for us. Like for example, the kids' school, They've been giving us lots of clothing, food. Some are giving gift cards and all that thing. So it's very helpful. I'm really speechless right now. I have lots of things in my mind, but in this kind of situation, like, I don't know where to start anymore.
Wow. Well, with me now in studio is Context Christine Yu, Christine Jeffrey and his wife, their 2 children. They're just one family. How many more are like them in Gosford?
Right, so 700 people are homeless right now. Some have found places to stay with family and friends, but there's still 354 that are displaced. 160 residents are currently with the Red Cross, but they can only be under their shelter for 14 days. So as of this Friday, they are left to their own devices to find their own resources.
And that's why cash donations to the school board are so important. But the poverty rate in this area of Black Creek is high. 67% are renters. What challenges will people have in finding stable housing?
So how are you going to go to work, have a sense of well-being, stock a fridge, feed your children when you don't know where you're going to go the next day, the next minute? This is a long-term mental health challenge, and it's going to be something that people are going to be looking to get as much stability as they can. And
a while coming. Wow. Okay. Well, we do want to direct you, our viewers, to help. And the best gift is a cash donation to the Toronto District School Board right now, because they are going specifically with that cash for families affected. So, Christine, we've got a link on our Context website. Just go to Context with Lorna. All the proceeds there. You see the Toronto District School Board donate page there. You'll find it quickly on the website. All proceeds will go towards clothing, food, other essentials to help people rebuild their lives. Christine, thank you for being on the ground with Jeffrey and keeping us abreast of this story. Thank you.
you're welcome.
So you want to help, but you don't know where to begin? 2 great organizations, the Salvation Army and Samaritan's Purse. Dan Miller with the Salvation Army and Brent Davis there in Calgary getting ready for Samaritan's Purse. Thank you both. Dan, where do you begin? You want to volunteer with the Salvation Army. You want to be there. What kind of person, what kind of tasks are you going to be asked to do?
Well, when there's a disaster, what the biggest thing is, you got to be compassionate to the people that are suffering through a disaster. Our tagline is giving hope today. Well, hope in the midst of disaster is what we really say. You got to be there to go alongside them and help them through this devastating thing that's happened to them. You don't know all the back ends of it. Somebody could have lost their family. They could have done a lot of different things and lost all their belongings. So it's really coming alongside, walking alongside of them and being compassionate and understanding what they're going through.
Okay, Brent, what do you want to see in volunteers? What kind of attitudes, what kind of tasks?
Absolutely the same thing. Compassion is number one for us. We respond all across the country to major disasters that have significant community impact. And while oftentimes the media picks up, the hundreds or the thousands of folks that are impacted, we're looking at the one at a time as we're interacting with homeowners. We're helping clean out basements after floods, tarping roofs after tornadoes, doing a lot of chainsaw work. The amazing thing is, though, you don't need to be a construction specialist or a skilled tradesman or woman to go out and do the work that we do. We provide all of the training on site, and it's just a matter of being willing to step out. And what we say is, if you can put in a good hard day's worth of gardening, then you've got enough physical ability to come out and volunteer with us and really provide that practical help following these storms.
Okay. Is volunteerism decreasing? Dan, you've been with the Salvation Army for a few decades. Are you seeing our landscape of neighborliness shift for the good, for the bad?
In some ways, but we still have a lot of volunteers. When something happens, people always seem to jump on board and want to come on board and help. It's the compassion there of just knowing that somebody else is suffering, people jump on board. So yeah, we might have a decrease on some volunteering, but you know what? Our young people are actually doing a lot of volunteering nowadays too, which is great to see. So I would say that it's pretty steady, and we just want to keep having more volunteers.
Well, we're glad that you guys are there for the front line of, you first work with first responders, both of you, and for jumping right on board. Have you got enough shoeboxes filled yet? That's a great volunteerism role, Brent, as well. The Samaritan's Purse shoebox, get a box of love, Christmas cheer to children. Are they all full? You're done?
No, they're never done. We're in the midst of watching them all starting to roll into the warehouse, and yeah, absolutely incredible to watch these gifts. Again, each one is uniquely packed by an individual or by a family, and it's received by an individual, and so it's incredible to watch them starting to come in. And it is not too late to pack a shoebox or even to go online at SamaritansPurse.ca. And you can even pack a shoebox online and drop whatever you want into it, and we'll pack it for you.
All right. Well, great from both of you for reminding us that that spirit of being a good neighbor is alive and well. Dan Miller of the Salvation Army and Brent Davis from Samaritan's Purse, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, police, firefighters, and paramedics are first to the scene in a time of crisis. Who cares for our first responders? That's still ahead. Plus, multi-faith groups help each other in the aftermath of a tragic Grenville apartment fire in London, England. What lessons can we learn? That's coming up. To Italy now, where a natural disaster impacting ancient Venice has brought the worst flooding in 50 years. Joining us now is our Rome correspondent, Sheridan Sanders. Hi, Sheridan.
Hi, Lorna.
You know, we're talking about neighbors helping neighbors, and it is unusual to me that the Pope, a great neighbor to Venice, would choose this historic flooding to now talk about ecological sin, to add ecological sin to the catechism. Is it a neighborly coincidence, or was this long planned?
You know, obviously, the disaster in Venice is underscores the necessity for this type of discussion, but this is actually part of a long succession of thought that has been developed really from John the 23rd right through to Pope Francis in his in his encyclical Laudato Si. So really, what we're seeing here is just an emphasis again on how important looking after the environment and respecting the environment, our common home, is.
Okay, so the Pope has drawn this deeply from the Bible. Explain what he's interpreting in the Bible to apply to all of our actions as neighbors when it comes to the environment.
Yeah, the first thing that we see in the Gospel of Creation is that God creates the world and everything in it, and the world is his dominion. It belongs to him. So we're really just participants in it. And, we don't own anything in creation. And so we're sharing it with each other. And this is why we ought to be neighborly towards each other, because, this is our common home. And no one has dominion over the earth. And it's an act of justice towards God to respect it and to respect each other.
Okay. The Catholic Church is on the front lines in the poorest communities affected by natural disasters. How does that big global church motivate people to care for others in crisis?
Well, it comes all from the teachings of Jesus. Jesus is our ultimate model when it comes to this. I mean, you can see it in the Beatitudes and essentially in Mass when you go together and you participate in a communion. How can you be indifferent to someone else's suffering if you are part of one community ultimately? And that extends, of course, not just to those who are part of the faith, but outside of the faith as well. So, if you love Jesus, it seems a natural extension.
All right. Sheridan Sanders, our correspondent in Rome, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
In 2017, a devastating fire broke out in the Grenville Towers of London, England, and many of the victims there felt betrayed and forgotten. But a new report finds multi-faith groups were able to get to the crisis. Amy Plender researched how faith groups served in their communities in the aftermath. She joins us now from London. Amy, what led you to narrow research in on a multi-faith perspective in a crisis like Grenville?
Yeah, thanks. Well, when I was working at Theos, our main target audience is the informed non-believer. So we wanted to show people who might not understand or recognize the importance of a faith diverse community, who might assume that secular is always going to be the most straightforward and practical response. We were really interested in how the faith-based communities in the local area were able to serve the whole person, to provide practical, emotional, and spiritual support in a way that you don't always see in an initial emergency response. So we saw something just from the news coverage that seemed particularly unique and compelling around the Grenville community, and we just wanted to find out more.
And so as I read through your report, and you've got lots of 30 different groups that you studied, they moved fast, didn't they? The big difference about faith communities is, one, they can go in very fast, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. The vast majority of the communities and congregations I spoke to were not just based in their place of work or their place of worship in the local area, but they also lived there. If you're a pastor of a church, you will most likely live within walking distance of your church building, in the way that if you're an office worker, you probably won't, certainly not in London anyway. So these were people who were not just serving clients, but they were serving their friends and their local communities. So for many of them, they were able to be on the ground and to be opening up their churches and their mosques even before the final emergency vehicles, what we call the blue light services, the ambulances, the fire brigade and the police. Even before the final vehicles of them had arrived, people were already opening up places of worship as for place of respite and safety.
Three big conclusions that came away. One was move fast. The second was bring stuff, right? That really supplies are needed. Tell us about that.
The important thing is to be able to say politely and firmly no to too many donations. Something I heard again and again was that the centres became overwhelmed and overcrowded with physical donations and with stuff. So the best donation in an emergency really is money, is financial, yes. Because that can be stored away, it doesn't take up any room, and it can be used for anything. It can be used to buy the things that are needed, or it can be put in a fund for counselling or for holiday camps or for needs as they arise later on.
And the third thing which your report was so powerful to me on was there needed to be sacred spaces, whether it was a mosque or a church. There needed to be soul care done. And I loved it how the fact that it was during Ramadan of the fire, that Muslims were awake, they were praying, they were ready to respond so quickly. Churches then became gathering places. It really underlines the importance of the space that the faith community brings into a crisis, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And this was something that I found really encouraging from the report. It was, of course, people of faith tended to go to their either their regular church, their regular place of worship where they went every week, or another one that felt familiar to them. Christians might go to a different church if it just happened to be nearer. But also significantly, we saw people from other faiths and none going and sitting in the mosques and in the churches, just as you say, a safe space, a place of quiet and calm, away from the sirens and away from the crowds, where they were able to catch their breath, light a candle, say a prayer if they wanted to, or just rest. And that's something that I think, whatever your beliefs, it's really important to allow space for the whole person, for the spiritual, the emotional side, that if a church has plenty of room, then that can provide that for anyone.
Well, Amy Plender from IDO Research will put a link to your faith-based report on times of crisis on our website. Thank you for joining us from London. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
The health and well-being of victims of tragedy and disaster are the reason why our first responders do the jobs they do. But what is it like to be first on the scene of a tragedy? What about their care? That's still ahead. More than 600 homes have been destroyed in Australia by wildfires, and 6 people were killed at the outset of that break. Fires have spread over 6,000 kilometers and could be seen from the International Space Station. Reverend Dr. Stephen Robinson is a National Disaster Recovery Officer in Australia, and he joins us now from Queensland, Australia. You've mentioned, Stephen, that your updates are calling these unprecedented. Help us understand what's different this time.
Sure. I've been working in this space for probably 20 years, and we've never seen anything quite like it. In the past, we've had probably 5 communities at a time in major bushfire emergencies affected, but we've had up to 30 in this case, so it's way further than anything we've done. And it's also been extended. This particular emergency started back in September, the first week of spring for us here. And it still continues, and there is no end in sight at the moment. Largely, yeah.
There's been people in their 70s, firefighters in their 70s, helping to fight this fire. How are Australians showing their support to their neighbours in this crisis?
There's a very strong volunteer spirit in Australia, and we have probably one of the largest volunteer firefighting services in New South Wales of over 70,000 people. And quite a lot of those are people who are retired, and they are able to give a fair amount of their time and energy to be able to support their communities and to go out of area to support others as well. And there's many other ways in which people have been connected through volunteering for Red Cross and other organisations as well.
Wow, what a demanding role for a retiree. But you've written about this. You've had time in between the disasters. You've written a book called Ministry in Disaster Zones, Lessons from the Edge. What do we need to learn if we want to be good neighbours?
Most of my work has been with supporting ministers and pastors and other religious carers in the work that they do, but the same lessons apply right across the board in the way of being able to take care of people, but be aware of how they're affected, but also how to take care of yourself while doing that. So I guess the most important lessons in terms of how to be engaged, to be aware of what's out there already, what government help is on what the arrangements are for that, and also in how to engage in a way that's not going to intrude, but will be most efficiently filling the gaps where the government isn't working.
Okay, and thank you for that reminder that the volunteer needs to take care of themselves as well. Yeah. Reverend Dr. Stephen Robinson from that beautiful land down under, take care. Bless you as you fight with those fire and those caregivers, and we'll put the link to your book up on the website. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
They're the first ones we call when a crisis hits. First responders face evil. They face tragedy daily. How do they cope? Staff Sergeant Malcolm Wright is the head of the Wellness Unit for Halton Police Services, and Aaron Grote is a volunteer police chaplain. Malcolm, let's go to you. Mm-hmm. Within 24 hours, you can get a traumatized police officer into professional care. How has that been set up and why?
It was set up because of a provincial mandate a number of years ago where police organisations were required to have mental health strategies in place. And the strategy that we decided to go with was to hire a psychologist and have them partially on staff on a part-time basis so that we can access them quickly and whenever a member needs that support. Not just our frontline officers, but any member who's involved in a critical incident, from the backroom staff to the front.
Okay, Malcolm, there's so many different faces that they see in the community, so many terrible doors they have to push open and see something. Your group actually reached out and said, we need chaplaincy. And And that's where, Aaron, you were brought on board. You're one of the multi-faith team members. What do you do for the police?
So as a volunteer, my mandate is to go and to be, and I describe it this way, to be a loitering presence where I'm just there connecting with officers and staff, and just to be there to talk with them, to encourage them, and to, if the topic comes up, to address that other side of who they are and that spiritual part of it. And no matter what faith tradition they come from, is to answer questions, to talk about that, and just make sure they're caring for that spiritual side of who they are.
Okay, so Malcolm, what are the ingredients for wellness that you know a police officer needs when he's faced trauma?
The coping mechanisms we start with at the very front end for all of our members, not just our police officers, but our civilian members. So there's a training and education portion that begins the moment they start with the police service, letting them know what the supports are, building resilience in our members to understand what they're likely to face. And that's the biggest issue. You have to understand what you're likely to face and how it might affect you, so that when it does happen, you can walk in the right direction and find the supports immediately.
I'm thinking of a police officer when she goes home to her family. How does she separate what she has seen? How do you help them with that wellness? Separation
is very, very difficult because life affects us all. It's not just what we see in our employment. Family issues, relationships, finances, children, all of those have a big impact on us as well. So separating that is very, very difficult. And the supports that we provide for our members, we provide equal supports for family members and retired members as well. So our unit has a huge reach within our organisation.
Aaron, as a pastor, a police chaplain, you're really doing this like a neighbor. It's a volunteer role. You aren't a staffer. You're not a police officer.
No.
As a neighbor, pastor, chaplain, what have you noticed about our first responders? What do they need?
What they need. First of all, I've noticed that we have an incredible group of individuals that serve Halton region. Secondly, what they need is, from my perspective, a lot of appreciation for what they do. They see things that none of us would want to see. They go to places that none of us would want to go to, but they do it willfully, and they do it because they genuinely care about their community. And to be able to encourage them and support them, that comes also from the fact that my brother's a police officer for over 20 years with Durham Regional Police, and so I've seen it's a tough job. And so for me to give back a little bit to those who serve us so faithfully, it's been just an encouraging thing for me to be part of.
All right, we should have a National First Responders Day, actually maybe once a week. Thank you both for teaching us to be good neighbors to our first responders. Malcolm and Aaron, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we close, if you can help financially in supporting the low-income families in the Gosford Fire in Toronto, head to our website, and there we'll get you connected to the school board donate page, which will specifically help families affected, and it is money they need. The school board will distribute it. Okay. Now, next, head to our YouTube channel, because I'll give another lesson there on being a good neighbor. And you can also spend more time on the website learning the agencies that we have listed there for you to be a good neighbor. But go for a special broadcast for insiders only over to YouTube. For all of us at Context, I'm Lorna Duick. That was our full show. That's posted every Thursday on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get our weekly episodes and web exclusives.